Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with all the latest on books, trails, festivals, gear, events, fitness, health, and more. This podcast is number 34, and it's going out on November the 7th. It's chilly here and it never really got light today. It feels a bit like living in the Arctic Circle, minus the snow. But I've seen enough of that in Canada and the US to last a lifetime. Halloween's over for another year. I guess next on the agenda is Thanksgiving in the US and then Black Friday, which is more like Grey Friday here in the UK, because there really aren't the same kind of discounts as there would be in the US. Dropping the price by 5% or buy one get one half price isn't really a great deal, or I don't think so. Because we didn't get a hike in last week, my son and I went to the beach in the rain to do some litter picking instead, and we bought 2 of those grabbers, both of which broke inside 10 minutes. I was the one holding the bag while he hit me with all the soggy litter as he tried to find the bag opening. I'm sure next time we go it will be litter filled again. This weekend looks good though, weather-wise, although the number of daylight hours is dropping fast. The Halloween place names segment that we did last week seemed to go down well, and thanks to those of you who sent in their own spooky place names, none of which I'd ever heard of or been to. This week we'll revert to the format of some details on November the 7th. It is Hug a Bear Day, which, if you're hiking and you see one, I would not recommend. We had one in the garden once in Canada, and they are large, to put it mildly. It's Fountain Pen Day. As a lefty, those things are lethal. Does anyone actually use a pen anymore? Maybe for autographs. I do collect autographs, and I thought that maybe I could look really clever and find someone's birthday whose autograph I have. But seeing as it's limited to a collection of sports and music autographs, it was a tough ask, but there were 2. Footballer Rio Ferdinand and baseball player, now commentator, Buck Martinez. Other birthdays include Trotsky and Joni Mitchell. I was at the Juno Awards with her once, although not sitting at the same table. I can't even remember who was at the same table as me, but that's maybe because I went a few times, so they all blur into one. Oh, and the Junos are at the Canadian Music Awards, by the way. Let's move on. On last week's podcast, we had a conversation about the psychology of long-distance walking. I enjoyed that conversation, and I really enjoyed this week's interview as well, with a school counsellor in the state of Maine, and she takes students hiking instead of having to do detention. But before we get to that, if you do have news, guest ideas, or even subjects to cover, or comments, or you want to advertise, please get in touch via walkingpost.com, or you can just email me at jim@walkingpost.com. Okay, let's go through some of the headlines of the news articles you may have missed that we had on walkingpost.com this past week. There is a new 200-mile trail network in Northumberland. REI Co-op and Ambercycle are working together on scaling up production of regenerated polyester, and Destination Tweed is looking for stories about the river for when the new Tweed Trail opens in 2028. And that's not easy to say, Tweed Trail. Insta360 launched the X4 Air camera, and seeing as I'm a child at heart, I really want one. 16.5 million euros has been earmarked for 63 outdoor recreation projects in Ireland, and many of those are for walking. And a study shows that longer walks are better for cardiovascular health than the same amount of time broken up into shorter walks. A new section of the Somerset Circle has been completed, and there was an announcement about the Spring 2026 Mole Valley Spring Walk Festival, and that's in Surrey. And you can read all of these and more at walkingpost.com. This week we're talking about detention. It wasn't really a thing when I was in school. If you did something wrong, they just hit you with a cane or with something else. The stories I could tell. Recently, a school in Bath, Maine, found itself in the news thanks to its counsellor, Leslie Trundy. Maine is the big state on the border with Canada, a place that I know well as I covered parts of Maine when I was a newspaper editor in Canada. Great place for the great outdoors and hiking, and very big moose. The news revolved around detention. You could either stay inside for detention or you could go on a hike. And so a program was born. Let's find out about it and how well it's working from the school counsellor herself, Leslie Trundy. Hi Leslie, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Maybe before we get to the details, you could give us some background on your school career so far.
This is my 21st year at Morse High School, and I work as a school counselor. We're a 9 through 12 school, and in the springtime, we onboard the 8th graders going to their school and meeting with them one-on-one along with their family members to help with the transition to the high school and kind of know what to expect and personalize the attention we can provide for them, as well as get to know them and a little bit about their background, because that is really instructive when it comes to supporting a student and family around goals, barriers that they might face, and it sort of threads its way through all the work. So, for example, in ninth grade, we're really focused on that transition and connecting with the high school and the opportunities that are available. And then in the senior year, junior and senior year, a lot of focus transitions to what are you going to do after high school, and knowing students and where they're coming from. Sometimes we can connect them with a support program that would allow them to reach a goal that they might have for themselves. So as a school counselor, I'm concerned about their academics, of course, and also the things that get in the way of academics that maybe have to do with personal social concerns. And I'm also always thinking about what their future might hold. And that's the great thing about being a high school counselor, is they are approaching being a little bit more independent from their families. So no matter what their family structure was, they are closer to possibly being able to define more what they want. So we partner with other people in the school and community to achieve all of that.
Must have changed a lot though. You said 21 years. I mean, 21 years ago, they didn't all have a phone attached to the side of their head.
Yes, I know. And now they don't either, because Morse is we're using yonder pouches. Have you heard about this?
No.
So we ask that kids were phone free during the school day, and we ask that kids keep their phone in their yonder pouch, or in their car. Or there's a small group of kids that will keep them in the front office so they don't access their phones during the school day. We started that last year, which has really been a great thing for our school. And yes, it was different. And I saw the school before and then during and now this after period where we're trying, this is our goal, to be back to not having the phones.
No
Yeah.
withdrawal symptoms or anything?
I think that some kids have had a lot of parents too felt very anxious about it, especially in America with this really like epidemic of school shootings. I think parents were really concerned, like what will happen in an emergency. But we do have protocols in an emergency, and research has shown that it's better not to have everyone have phones in an emergency. That was hard for, I think, adults too, to think about not having that access to their kids and being able to track where their kids are.
The other thing that I didn't ask as well is the location of the school. Is it in a city? Is it rural?
Yeah, so I would say we're considered a rural school. Bath is a city of about 8,500 people, and the high school has about 600 students. We used to be right near the downtown, but we built this school we moved in 2021 over February break. And this school sits in a more rural location, but we're close to the ball fields now, and we're close to that trail that I take the kids on, the Whiskeag Trail. It's a beautiful location, and we're still close enough to all the things in the city. But yeah, we're a rural school, and the kids come from rural areas. So we are 5 towns that represent Morse High School. So Georgetown, West Bath, Phippsburg, Bath, and well, Georgetown and Rouseck. So like a lot of kids in Woolwich, they all feed into Morse High School.
We're talking about detention, but was that a big issue at the school?
Yeah, I would say since I started working at Morse, kids break rules. They don't comply with our expectations of them. So the biggest reason that a student last year was on the hike with me was because they had their phone, or they had a 1 hour that became a 2 hour that became a 3 hour because they forgot and didn't serve it, or they didn't communicate the plan, or disrespect towards another peer or teacher. Those were sort of the top three reasons. And I would say that those are pretty consistent with when I first started as well. And in the old school, sometimes I would see kids like doing good work around the school, like maybe polishing a banister or helping to rake leaves. And the assistant principal, I said, like, what are those kids up to? And he said, oh, well, they have detention. And it's a 3 hour detention after school. So I've offered them a 2 hour detention by if they do service, if they do a community service. And that continued even when we moved to the new school. And it was definitely part of how I started thinking about maybe I could offer this. Maybe this would be something that the administration would allow me to do, and maybe it would make a difference for kids. And my other big role in this was maybe those kids would join outing club, because a theme of the Teens to Trails parent organization that our outing club is under the umbrella of is how can you reach kids that wouldn't think of themselves as someone who would join an outing club? Are you reaching new Mainers? Maine has a big push right now for welcoming new Mainers. So those are people who are coming from, Democratic Republic of the Congo and South Africa and, lots of different places that they're coming and finding a new home in Maine. So the Teens to Trails organization really wants to be representative, even though Maine is still a very white state. They're always thinking like, how can you reach the full population of your school community? And I thought maybe through the detention hikes, I might pick up some members. And in fact, that's been true, which has really been gratifying.
Is this kind of a part of your philosophy of not just having a punishment for everything? Is that the way that you think anyway?
I think like my parenting philosophy and also just like my core belief and also my approach as a school counselor is I do think natural consequences is a great thing to support the idea of natural consequences. Within the school, we have to have some sort of structure, right, given our population. And sometimes you can have a conversation with a student and it can really move the dial, but the administrative team, they have a hierarchy about how they award a 1 hour, a 2 hour, a 3 hour detention. Sometimes it can move to an in-school suspension or even an out-of-school suspension. So there's sort of a hierarchy of the rules and if you break them. And for me, I think the other real thought process that I was going through when I thought about the detention hike was this idea that staying indoors for 3 hours for a kid who already probably was struggling to hold themselves together and follow all the school rules, that's a big ask. And what are they going to learn from that? What's going to come different from that? And I thought a 2 hour hike with me for some kids might not be, yeah, sign me up. It might be like, maybe I can get a lesser sentence, so I'll say yes to it. But these might be kids who don't normally hike. And what it gives me as a school counselor an opportunity to do is listen to them and maybe get them talking or at least expose them to, the quiet of nature or, just like opening their mind and eyes up to a different view that they maybe haven't seen ever or in a while. And maybe that would inspire some different thinking. And that really has been the case. So I'm not solving all the problems that are part of this student's life. I'm not making it so that they never have that very same detention reason again. But what I'm doing is like I'm fostering an opportunity for them to reflect, talk to me, talk to each other. That's been remarkable, the number of times where kids will say, oh, I got in trouble for fill in the blank, thinking like maybe it would give them cool cred. But the other kids saying to them, oh, well, the reason you got in trouble is you're a student athlete and you're held to a higher standard and your expectations of how you're behaving are different. And of course, you'd get in trouble for that. So I didn't have to say anything, the principal, this was another peer basically giving their 2 cents, their sage wisdom. And so the kid who had gotten in trouble, he was like, "Oh, I hadn't thought about it like that." So it's like that perspective shift of how we conduct ourselves, I think, can sometimes really be remarkable on the hikes.
Outside of school, are you a hiker?
Yeah, so I grew up in Girl Scouts, and I would say in the Girl Scout program in northern Michigan that I was part of, we loved being outside, but we didn't necessarily do a lot of, outdoors. I grew up skiing in northern Michigan, and I did really love, I've always loved being outside, a lot of beach walks, a lot of times. But then in my early 20s, I just, discovered Maine and discovered actual hiking with vista, big vistas, and I really fell in love with it. And when I was 24, I spent some time in Alaska, and then I also spent some time, well, I hiked the Appalachian Trail when I was 24. So, well, 23, 24, I was like Alaska hiking the Appalachian Trail. And when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, I had like hardly any backpacking experience, but I was very determined. And I had some wonderful people that were hiking around the same time as me, and they like taught me what I needed to know. And I just kind of learned by doing and had just a phenomenal 6.5 months was how long that I had sort of set aside to do that. And it was just extremely life-changing for me. And, ever since that time, I don't hike backpack all the time, but anytime I do go, I just can't get enough of it. I love it so much. And so my long-term goal as a school counselor was to establish an outing club. So it's really gratifying for me to combine the two parts of myself. Like I really think there's value in being a listener to anyone, to youth, to friends, to family. To be able to listen is a phenomenal gift you can give someone. And then sharing my love of the outdoors through these hikes. It's really been a great experience for me this last year, and I'm really blown away by the way the story has traveled, like giving me an opportunity to talk with folks like you and share. It's really a kind of a small idea, but I think it is having a big impact in our school community. And it seems like it's resonating for people in lots of corners of the world, which is great.
What's the reaction been like at every step? The students, the staff, administration, parents?
Yeah, I really want to give a shout out to the administrators. I do think that we have a trusting relationship with each other. I've worked with Eric, our building principal, my entire time that I've worked at Morse. He's also been here, so he knows me and he knows what I do and what I'm all about. But I had the idea on a Friday at the leadership conference. On Monday, I pitched it to the principal team, and then on Thursday, I had my first hike. So they've been integral and supportive from the jump. And almost from the jump, the kids said yes, that they would try it. And then they really liked it and they told their friends. So I was in the grocery store not long after the hike started, and a young man from the school was restocking like vegetables. And he said, "Oh, my friends really liked that hike that they went on with you." And I was sort of taken aback. And he said, "Oh, that detention hike." So the word was like getting out. And I pretty much always had kids that said yes and would come on the hike with me last year. So we hiked almost every Thursday. And over the course of the year, it was 19 hikes last year. And I would say, for the most part, parents have also been very supportive of it. There was one dad who felt like his son was having too much fun on the hikes. And it's true, his son was having fun. I think his son just has fun anywhere he goes. Life is fun for him. And so he said, I think it'd be better for him to have the indoor detention and really think about what he did. I think there's maybe 2 students that their family said, but for the most part, I think families have been really appreciative. And one mom, this fall, she said, "I'm so glad that my son can do the hike because he would get in more trouble in 3 hours indoors. Like I know he'd get a second detention. In detention, he'd get a detention." And he came and said he came with me, and he was wonderful. And he's in 9th grade, so I don't really know him too well yet. And it was a great opportunity for me just to talk with him and him to know that I'm a safe person to talk with.
Are there any kids that are doing things on purpose just so that they can go on the detention hikes? I would be doing that.
Yeah, that's the I would say no. We joke about that a lot on the hike too because I'm quick to tell them that I do it every Thursday. They don't have to be in trouble to come. And then they say, "Well, Mrs. Trundy, why do the time if you didn't do the crime?" But they do come. Like I have had I would say over half of the hikes have people that were in trouble and they just came out to be with a friend or just to go for a walk. And I also always make sure to pause halfway through when I provide them with the snack and water, and I read them a short, very short poem because I find that their attention spans are like that's how much they can take in. So I just want to capture the attention, but then I tell them why I'm doing it, and I always remind them that they can join outing club. Like I do my elevator speech for outing club. So I would say that no one seems to be getting in trouble on purpose so far that I can tell.
When you're on the hikes, do you do things like pointing out wildlife and different species and even things like foraging?
Yeah, I haven't done any foraging, but we have like paused in a few spots to appreciate like we've seen bald eagles, we've seen turtles sunning themselves on a hot afternoon. There's some logs that protrude out. Definitely pause sometimes because the kids can get kind of playful. We try and stay together as a group. Some kids, a bigger group, sometimes we're just like really hiking and we're hiking pretty quickly. So we might not stop as much with that kind of a group. I really read the hike.
This is the second year you said it's been taking
Yes.
place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's obviously sticking. What do you do in winter when it's cold and snowy?
Yeah, I bring extra hat and gloves. In advance of the hike, I communicate with home that it's very important that students have, a warm, solid shoe or boot and a coat and hat and gloves, but sometimes they don't bring those things. And I have ponchos if it's raining. And in Maine, we have this pretty cool program called Maine Gear Share. We have a membership, and I could borrow any gear I might need through Maine Gear Share, but I haven't really had to do that yet for the detention hikes. I have a bag of hat and gloves that have been donated from Tractor Supply. I just make sure to bring those. And sometimes kids are like, oh no, I don't need a hat or gloves, but pretty quickly on the hike, they're like, I changed my mind. Can I have the gloves? Can I have the hat? So we keep hiking. I will say there's a stretch of the trail that it kind of undulates with some elevation gain and loss, and the conditions on the trail can get icy in spots. So in those instances, we have to sometimes change our route or just like proceed with more caution and care. And I have to be more directive towards the students of where to walk for safety concerns.
You don't do the same trail every time, or do you do the same trail?
Almost always is the same trail. And sometimes I will vary the route that we take. We might go further on the road. Because the trail it stretches from the YMCA to Thornhead, so it's a 5 miles. But where we catch up with it, it makes some loops, which allows us to have like head out one way and return on another.
Is this something that you have tried to expand to other schools, or do you think it would work with other schools?
I definitely think it would work with other schools. And I went to the Teens to Trails conference and I had the idea. And then right away, I pretty much started it. And I loved it. And people seemed to really like it. So I just was excited, about it. And so I saw the Teens to Trails organizers at a conference, a weekend trip, October rendezvous. And so I said to the organizer, hey, I got inspired. I've been doing this thing. And she said, well, you should write that up for the Maine Department of Ed Good News Story. So it was written up in February, coinciding with School Counselor Week. And right away, a bunch of schools reached out to me and they were like, we love this. We want to try this at our school. And I know that our neighboring school of Wiscasset has tried it and it was successful. I just met with a principal at Mount Blue High School in northern Maine and sort of shared how I've done it. I talked with a woman in New York State who's a counselor, and she said she would like to advocate to the superintendent's group to try and bring it to New York State. And the one thing I will say is I made the hike optional. So detention is not my hike. Detention is 3 hours and you have the option to go on the hike. And I think that model's been successful for us because kids are opting into it. But I make it clear that when they're opting in, like I'm in charge. So this is what we're doing, and they're going to follow pretty basic rules about not littering and staying together as a group. But other than that, like they have freedom to just be who they are.
I guess bottom line is it working for the kids that are on detention? Are you seeing them less?
Yeah, I would say that I feel like for some kids, the detention hike was part of what worked for them. I think every year, which that's such a cool thing about watching kids grow and develop because you can literally see their growth and development through the 4 years. So even without the detention hike, it's very possible that those kids might have had the growth that they've had now in their sophomore year or whatever. However, I think because the punishment they received or the time that they had to pay back to the school was time with a school counselor in a small group that involved movement and some reflection. I think it was part of the recipe for what we're seeing. These kids that are getting in trouble, they're getting in trouble because maybe they're impulsive, they're the frontal lobe development that happens, right? But they also have great qualities about who they are. And I feel like sometimes on the hikes, they're sharing information about things with me that I just give them that positive regard. Like, that's so cool that that's a part of who you are. And I feel like it maybe offers them a moment to lean more into that side of themselves than the side that got them into trouble in the first place, to take responsibility, to stand confident in who they are and make good choices.
Have any of them said that they're doing this outside of school now? Might not be a cool thing to admit, but
No, they have. Like, I've had kids join the club and it really sparked something in them. They started ice skating for the first time and they started to go on hikes with their family and friends. They signed up for overnight trips with me and they never stay overnight anywhere. Like, they never sleep away from home. And so there's really been some moments that have been phenomenal from it. Absolutely. Yeah. The first snow that we had last year, after school, the kids were like, we're still going to go. And I said, well, I'm going to go. Are you coming with me? And like, I'm handing out the ponchos. And so we were hiking, but we were on pavement and then we were on like a soccer field. But then we were at the edge of the woods and we were about to like walk onto the, uncharted terrain kind of. And one of the girls was like, we're really doing this? And I'm like, we're doing it. Like, it's okay. It's okay that it's snowing. We're still going to be in the woods. And it was like the most magical day. The snow it had transformed the environment. It was so pretty. And there's a place where we come down on the river and just watching the snow fall onto the river and they laugh so much. And it was a great hike. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things is that you could do the same hike every week and it would be different every time. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's enjoying it. There's no downside to this, definitely.
There really hasn't been. People who are following you already know this, but just the opportunity to return to ourselves, return to our younger selves, it just waits in the woods. And I see that every week in the kids. They can start the hike from a lot of different places, but by the time we come back, they're in a different place than when we started, and I would say a better place.
I enjoyed that one, and as I said in the conversation, I'd be on those walks as a kid. But Maine is a great place for walking. I'm not sure one of Europe's biggest housing estates in Hull was an ideal place for hiking. It was about 15 minutes from the old Hull to Hornsey railway line that was turned into a trail, which I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've walked in my youth. And before that, I've even been on the train along that line. Anyway, it's a great program and let's hope it spreads to even more places not just across the US, but North America, and there's no reason why it wouldn't work everywhere. So we'll leave it there for this week. If you do have news or suggestions for podcast guests, please do get in touch through jim@walkingpost.com. I'm always looking for guests, whether it's about new trails, new equipment, or a new book, or someone who's done an amazing walk somewhere. So I hope you enjoyed this week's walkingpost.com podcast, and I hope that you have a great week, hopefully with a walk somewhere, and not necessarily because of detention. So, until next time, happy trails! Walking Post from walkingpost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.